Zindabad, 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 Murdabad, Murdabad, Allahu Akbar, Ya Rasulullah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين فاطر السماوات والأرضين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ولعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وهو أصدق الصادقين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Dear brothers and sisters, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala magnify your reward and our reward for your remembrance of the musibat of Imam al-Hussein. One of the things that is very miraculous about the story of Imam Hussein is that it is a story that never gets old. That most stories, when you hear them, you listen to them one time, two times, three times, you get tired of hearing a similar story. But something about the story of Karbala draws the hearts back to Hussein every year. Inna fi qulub al-Hussein, inna fi qulub al-mu'minin hararatun. Right? There is a harara, there is a fire in the hearts of the mu'mineen for the Imam, for Imam al-Hussein. And when we think about it, though years have passed, decades have passed, we still want to hear the story. We want to hear all the details about how the throat of Ali al-Asghar was pierced, how the body of Hazrat Qasim was trampled on, how Hazrat Abbas went to get water. All of these details. See, most of the stories that we hear, when we hear something that is stressful for us, then it causes pain for us. If we hear about somebody that was injured, somebody that was hurt in an accident, somebody whose body was trampled, it's not something that normally we want to hear. It stresses us out. But there's something about the story of Abu Abdullah that instead of becoming traumatized, instead of becoming stressed from hearing it, it brings some peace to our hearts. It brings some calm to us to hear this story over and over again. And so why is it that despite the tragedy, despite the time that has passed, we come back to this story year after year? One explanation is that perhaps this remembrance of Hussein is something that is in the human fitrah, that it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created every creature with, every makhluk with this desire to remember Imam Hussein. And so some of the narrations say that all of the makhlukat in the universe they cry for Hussein. Right? The birds in the skies, they cry for Hussein. The animals in the forest, they cry for Hussein. The ants on the ground, they cry for Hussein. All of the makhluqat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have a form of remembrance of Hussein, according to some narrations. In fact, we are told in narrations also that all of the Anbiya, also they cried for Imam Hussein. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Hazrat Adam to this earth, Hazrat Jibreel came to Adam alayhi salam and he told him the story of Karbala, and Hazrat Adam sat there, he cried for Hussein. And he sent lanat on the killers of Hussein. Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, Jibreel went to Hazrat Nuh, he told him the story of Karbala. Hazrat Nuh began to cry when he listened to the Majlis of Hussein. Hazrat Musa alayhi salam heard the story of Karbala, he began to cry. Hazrat Isa alayhi salam heard the story of Karbala, he began to cry. Until we came to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And in the 4th year of Hijrah, Ali and Fatima are blessed with a son, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And when he's born, he's brought to the house of the Holy Prophet. And the Prophet begins holding Hussein, he's cuddling Hussein, he's kissing Hussein. And Jibreel comes to the Holy Prophet, and maybe he thinks to himself that now I have to tell Rasulullah about this tragedy of Hussein. And so he sees Rasulullah kissing Hussein, and Jibreel begins to cry. And Jibreel says to Rasulullah that, Rasulullah asks Jibreel, why are you crying? Right? This is a happy occasion. We have a new son in the family, my blessed grandson. Why is it that you're crying? And Jibreel thinks, how am I going to tell this musibah to Rasulullah? He says to Rasulullah, O Prophet of God, do you love this child? O Ahmad, do you love this child that you're holding, Hussein? He says, by Allah, I love this child. He says that your ummah will slaughter this child after you kept him thirsty for 3 days. Rasulullah begins to cry as he hears the musibah of Imam al-Hussein. Just like that, we know that from the time of the Holy Prophet, the death of Hussein was foretold. And of course, as an Imam, he knew that he would die. But also other people also knew. Many of the Ashab of the Prophet, many of the Ahlul Bayt, they knew that this fate awaited Hussein. And so that is why when Hussein is leaving from Medina to go to Mecca, and from Mecca towards Kufa, many of the people that he meets along the way, they tell him that, Hussein, we see only death for you. We don't see any other future. Some of them come to Hussein and say that it's better that you make a peace treaty with Yazid. Perhaps you can go to some other land and you can be the leader over there and let Yazid become the Khalifa. And as we know, Hussein says some of his favorite statements that Yazid sharib al-khamri wa qatil al-nafs al-muhtamara wa mul'inun bil-fisq wa mithli la yubayi'u mithlah. That Yazid is a drunk, right? He is someone that kills innocent people. He is somebody that he is open about his fisq, about being someone who's not practicing Islam. And so therefore it's not possible for the likes of me to give bay'ah to the likes of him. In another statement he says, لو لم يكن في الدنيا ملجأ ولا مأوى لما بايعت يزيد ibn Muawiyah. That if in this entire dunya there was no place for me to go, Hussein says, if there was no place, no refuge for me, no place of safety for me, then I still would not give bay'ah to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And look at the dignity of Hussein. That he says, no matter where you send me, if there was no place for me, still I wouldn't give bay'ah to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And he says to his followers, as they write to him about joining him, as he corresponds to them, he says, Inna man lahika bi istashhada, wa man takhallafa lam yudrikul fath. That whoever joins me, then they will for sure achieve shahadat. but whoever leaves me behind, whoever does not join me, there is no victory for them. And there's no victory. And so Hussein is drawing a line in the sand. Right? Everyone has a decision to make. We see that different people make different decisions when it comes to Karbala. Right? We think about our own lives, that if our Imam was in front of us, or maybe even if he's not in front of us, there are some things we know the Imam wants us to do. Right? So what are our reasons for following or not following? Because in Karbala, we had the whole spectrum. We had the people that followed the Imam till the end. We had people who went with him for part of the journey. We had people who said that we can't go with you, but our hearts are with you. Take these horses because they might help you in Karbala. We had people that said that we know you are right, but we are afraid of Yazid. Right? We are people that think that you should make a peace treaty with Yazid in these circumstances. So every spectrum, every person was there on the spectrum. So now we ask ourselves, right, what is it that we would do? There's a story of a famous Arif in Iran that I was listening to, and I wanted to share this because I thought it was kind of related to what I'm talking about. They say that in Masjid Jamkaran, this was a masjid in Qom that was built by the orders of the Imam. That in Masjid Jamkaran in Qom, there's a famous masjid that was built by the order of Imam Zaman. And so they say that Imam Zaman visits this masjid from time to time. People have met him there. And there's a famous Arif that was known that sometimes he would meet with the Imam at this masjid. Right? This is a famous story. So one time he comes to the Imam and they're having a discussion. And he says to the Imam, right, when they have this meeting, that, Imam, when is your Zuhur going to happen? And the Imam says that, I don't have followers. And the Arif says to the Imam that, look at this masjid. Imam, look at all these people that are here. Are they not your lovers? Are they not your followers? Have they not come here for you? This is your own masjid. They've come here. They're doing dua tawassul. Imam says to the man that, see, these people, if you knew, what are they asking for? He says that one person here, he's saying that, oh, Imam, help me to save up for a house. One person who's not married, he's saying, Imam, help me find a spouse. Help me find a suitable wife. One person is saying, oh, Imam, I'm sick, so give me health. Is anyone actually saying, right, oh, Imam, come, hasten your zuhur so that I can be with you? Right? It's a very different prayer. Right? Imam says that, very few people are saying this. Right? This is why I'm not returning. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The topic that we began yesterday was regarding this connection of Imam Hussein to Rasulullah and trying to understand what was it about this noble personality. Because one of the things that, as we know, the Imam says is that I have come out against Muawiyah and Yazid because they have destroyed the sunnah of the Holy Prophet. And my goal is to reform this ummah, reform the ummah of my grandfather, my Jad. Right? In the mission of Rasulullah and Imam Hussein, there was no difference. Perhaps if the Prophet was alive during the Imam's time, he would do what Imam Hussein did, right? And vice versa. And we know this verse of Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُ اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. That in the example of the Holy Prophet, in the life of the Holy Prophet, you have uswatun hasana. You have a perfect example for your own life. Not for everyone. لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُ اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. For those who desire Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the hereafter. So it's not an example for all of us. It's not an example for every person. But for those who desire God and the akhirah, then he is an example for us. He is the best example. And we said that there is a seerah of the Holy Prophet which refers to his specific method of conduct, the way that he lived, the way that he interacted. That was based on a sound logic. According to Shahid Mutahhari, right? This is how he defines seerah. He says seerah is behavior that is rooted in a certain way of thinking, a certain ideology. It's not that, unlike you and I, we might wake up and decide to do one thing and a few hours later we decide to do something else. No, the Prophet's life was based on certain principles, certain ideals, right? Certain goals, a certain maqsad that he was trying to achieve, and everything fell in line. And so the sirat of the Prophet is trying to understand what were those principles he lived by, right? That now we can try to imitate in our own lives. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So I'd like to yesterday's discussion was about the simplicity of the Prophet's life. That whenever the Prophet had a choice between living simply and living perhaps with more comfortably, he chose the bare minimum. He chose to live with just the basics of what he needed to survive. We gave some examples of that. And we said that there was a wisdom in that, and that this allowed him to focus on his mission, his goal was this intentional simplicity with which he lived, right? Intentional simplicity, right? And that allowed him to eliminate all of his distractions. Just like we have so many distractions in our life, calling us away from the Imam, calling us away from Ahlul Bayt. What are those distractions that we can eliminate in our lives? We talked about that yesterday. Today, I'd like to focus on a different aspect of the prophetic seerah. And I'd like to introduce this with a question that we ask ourselves. It's maybe not a question we've asked ourselves, but the question is, if someone were to ask you, who are you? Like, what would you say? Right? Who are you? It's a very simple question. It's also a very profound question, right? When I'm saying, who are you, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm asking you just for your name? No, I didn't say, what is your name? I said, who are you? Right? What is this existence of yours? Some people may answer that question in different ways. They might say, for example, that, who am I? I am a Pakistani, right? I'm an Indian. I am Punjabi, right? I am an attorney, right? Well, I wasn't asking you for your nationality, right? I was asking you who you were. I wasn't asking you for your profession, right? I was asking you, I wasn't saying what you do from 9 to 6 p.m. I said, who are you? Maybe someone will say, I'm a woman, right? I'm a man. I'm a Democrat, right? I'm a feminist. Oh, you're telling me this is what you believe, right? These are some ideas that you have. Is that you? Right? Or are these just some ideas that you have in your head that maybe can be changed? One of the things that when we try to understand this question from an Islamic lens, right, we want to try to get at is this concept of identity and cultivating an Islamic identity. Right? When we ask this question, the reality of our answer is that at our deepest core, we are ibadullah, right? Are the servants of the Almighty, right? At our deepest, right, fundamental essence of us. Doesn't mean that we can't have other identities. Perhaps you are Pakistani, you are Indian, you are this, you are an attorney, you are an IT, you are a feminist, you are a Democrat. All of those things can be true at some level, at a secondary, at a tertiary level, but at your core, all of us, right, are fuqara ilallah, that we have that relationship of dependency to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, why is this important to understand what our identity is? This is a big discussion also in education today. That why do people lose faith? Sometimes it's not because they didn't understand something. It's not because I believed, for example, I didn't believe in Tawheed. It's not because I didn't believe in Imam Hussein. It's because that identity, right, as a Muslim was not strong. Their understanding of what it means to be a Muslim, what it means to be an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as who they are was not strong. What happens if I am in a place where I am not sure of who I am? If I go to a school, but I feel that, for example, that I am a terrorist, and I think that everyone thinks that I'm a terrorist, and what is going to happen to me in that school, right? If I'm a middle schooler, high schooler, if I feel that I am part of a religion that promotes terrorism, then what happens to me in that school? I become maybe depressed. I don't have confidence. I lose my sense of agency. I don't feel like I am in control. Someone else has told me who I am rather than me defining it for myself, right? If the child goes to school thinking these things, then he doesn't have that identity that has an effect on him psychologically, right? And eventually what happens, he begins to lose that identity because he wants to fit in. He wants to be part of this broader culture. He wants to assimilate. And in the society in which we live, one of the goals of this American project of Western civilization is the idea of a melting pot, that all identities, all backgrounds should blend in and become one, in one melting pot, become one thing, right? We will all blend together. That is a very dangerous idea, okay? Now, it's not to say that all aspects of American culture or Western culture are un-Islamic. Right? I'm not saying that we live in our own ghettos, we live in our own communities, we never interact. I'm not saying that, right? What I am saying is that we have to think about those aspects of American culture that are compatible with Islam versus those aspects that are not compatible with Islam. And those things that are compatible, we can adopt those. Those things that are not compatible, we stay away from them. For example, if you interact with Americans, you know that one thing that they are known for, that they are very good with, is charity, right? Giving in the way of, right, some higher purpose, right? They often can be very charitable people. After, for example, these storms, Hurricane Katrina, and these different storms, you see stories of people coming from different cities, states to go volunteer, to go save people who are drowning, right? To donate, to rebuild homes. All of these things, Habitat for Humanity, you see these nonprofit groups that are building homes for needy people and selling them for, less than $100,000. All of these projects, one thing that they are known for is to be very charitable. Okay, well, that is a great thing. As Muslims, we have no problem, right? That's one aspect of Islam that maybe we can do better, right? If we were to follow their example, right? How much they go for charity projects, how much they go for service. Okay, now there's other things in American culture that we would question. For example, individualism. This concept of the most important thing is my own feeling, my own ideas, right? This individualism that is taught to children from a very young age, that you are smart enough to form an opinion, you are smart enough to be your own person, right? Well, that's a little bit dangerous, right? That a kid who's 10, 12, 14, should we really be telling them that you are your own individual? You're not accountable. You should follow someone else's ideas until you become a little bit mature. No, that's a little bit dangerous, right? And then that breeds other ideas into other things. Okay, so there's some aspects. My point is to say that there's some aspects of deen that are compatible. There are some that are not compatible. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the things that I work in a school, and one of the things that I've noticed, and some research also says this, and I've also found this to be true. There's narrations that say that, when your children are young, what should we do to keep them on the right path? We should teach them the stories of the prophets and the Ahlul Bayt, right? We should teach them the stories of the Ahlul Bayt when they are young. And not just when they're young, maybe when they're in middle school too. Right? There's a profound wisdom in this. Now, why? Because that child maybe he cannot argue for the existence of God. But what does the research say? The research says that if you want to improve somebody's behavior, if you want a child to behave well, if you want a child to have good akhlaq, if you want a child to not get into trouble, right? And who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want their children to be well behaved? Doesn't want them to have good akhlaq? Doesn't want them to be respectful of elders? Doesn't want them to be good mannered? Right? Everyone wants that for their own kids. So now there's an interesting nugget of research in education that says that if you want to strengthen your child's character, if you want their character to improve, then strengthen their identity. Right? Strengthen their identity. Because if that child has an identity and he knows who I am, and he knows what I stand for, and he knows which house I am associated with, right? He knows which house, right, my parents follow. He knows who I have as a role model, right? This is who I am. Now that child, if you give him that, everything else will come, right? Why? Because he's answered that question of who am I for himself. Right? He's answered that question. He's not confused, right? Now in the modern world, they have muddied this question up. One of the problems is that in education, they have confused children. They have confused insan. We don't know who we are, right? We don't know. We think many answers to this question. Kids don't know who they are, right? When you take away these majalis, when you take away these sacred spaces, when you take away their identity, and you replace it with TikTok videos and Instagram reels and unlimited scrolling and shows, not only does their attention span go down, but their identity becomes confused. Who am I? What is my goal? I don't know. I've just been watching videos of cats fighting each other, right, for the last few hours. I don't know what my identity is. Don't ask me that question, right? It's a difficult question. Okay, so, right, the research says that if you want your kid to be well behaved and strengthen their what? Identity, which is different from belief. Right? Belief is your understanding of deen, which is also important. But one thing we want to strengthen is the identity. And when we see, right, that child, for example, today we will talk about Hazrat Qasim. Right? Say that Hazrat Qasim was that youth who knew who he was. Al-maut ashaddu aladdu min al-asal. That death is better for me than honey. What child at 13 will say that, except for a child who knows who he is? Right? They say during the Iran-Iraq war, there was a boy that he was around the age of Hazrat Qasim, right? And he wanted to fight. He was 13 years old. And he said that he kept trying to sign up, with the Basij and go and fight, against the Iraqis. And they kept turning him down. They said, you're a little bit too young. You need to put on some muscle. You need to get a little bit older. Maybe if this is still going in a few years, then you can fight, inshallah. So what this boy did, it's a very famous story, is that he faked his identification card. He changed it to look a little bit older, right? Instead of 13, he came, 16, 17. Somehow he was able to convince people that he's a little bit older. And there was a city that was very pivotal for the Iran-Iraq war called Khorram Sheher. So he went there. He said to his family that I want to go there. I don't know the details of did his family know or did they not know, but eventually the story is that somehow he found his way to that city. As he saw that the Iraqi troops were advancing, right, he made a decision that, he saw that, okay, we're about to lose this city. So he went and he strapped himself with some explosive and he went, one of the Iraqi tanks was coming and somehow he secretly went under one of the tanks. And of course he died when the tank exploded as well. Now what happened was that when they saw this explosion, they thought that the Iranians had put mines on this path, right? So they kind of retreated. And so some analysts say that just this action, it changed the course of, right, this city and then the war. And even today, if you go to this young man's grave, there is a tank that is over his grave. And even Imam Khomeini, has told this story and said, this is a boy that, is a model for me and these kinds of things. So these examples are there. So we see the Holy Prophet, one of his tasks was to strengthen the identity of the Muslims. And so what does he do? How does he do that? Right? How is it possible that one man, you have so much, this is something that still boggles my mind, right? That, how difficult it is to change people, right? How difficult is it to change one person? If you're in psychology, psychiatry, you're working with a client, right? One client you work with weeks, months, years, right? Maybe there's a little bit of change in their life, right? You're working with them for an hour. How is it that the Holy Prophet, right, in the span of 23 years, this man who grew up without a father and mother, his family was opposed to him, right? He was not given a formal education, all of these things that we know about him. How is it that possible that he changed the course of a civilization in these 23 years in his own life? In the most jahil, in the most backward society to which he was sent, how is it possible for this man to bring this change? Right? This is a question that someone was asking me yesterday, that what did he do? I don't know. Right? If I knew that, then I probably wouldn't be sitting here. Right? I would be somewhere else if I knew the secret to what the Prophet did. Right? Scholars can research, they can try to look at the Prophet's life, but can anybody give the formula? No, we don't know the formula, right? Part of it was divine grace, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ta'yid. But we can look at some aspects of his life and say that maybe these were some things that he did. One of the things that he did in my own research is that he focused on developing a identity, right, for his followers, a distinct identity, an identity that was different than all the other groups that were around them. He said that you all are Muslims. When he went from Mecca to Medina, the Hijrat, when he gets there, what does he do? He brings his camel, right? And all of the people of Medina are saying, Prophet, stay with us. Prophet, come here to our home when you are coming, because they were ready for him. So they said, wherever you want to come stay at our home, be our guest. Holy Prophet says what? He says that, well, wherever my camel stops, that is where I will stay. Right? And so the camel stops at the home of two young orphan boys. And Prophet says that, okay, I will stay with these two boys and their caretaker, and here's where I'll build the first masjid. Right? So he deals with this issue very easily. Instead of something that causes division in the community, he's able to solve it very easily. Now, the boys say that, we'll sell this to you, right? And he says, no, I don't want, right, like any he doesn't take any payment or anything like this. But Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. The orphans say that we would like to gift you this land. Prophet says no. Right? He says that I'll give you the price of this land. In fact, I'll give you more than what it's worth. So he gives the payment for the land, and this is where he builds the first masjid. Now, in the first masjid, what does he do? He doesn't just he has a part of the masjid that is for ibadah, a part that is for his family, right? Rooms that are connected. And then he has something that is called the area for Ahlul Sufa, right? Those who are impoverished, those Muslims who don't have their own home in Medina. He builds a part of the masjid, and he says that these Muslims in Medina who, for whatever reason, they don't have their own home, they've been expelled from their homes, you guys are going to live here. Right? So he makes a space in the masjid for them, one of the very first actions. Okay, now, how do you create unity in a diverse group of people? So you had all kinds of people who were with the Holy Prophet. You had the Muhajirin who were coming from Mecca. You had the Ansar who were living in Medina. Right? There was a rivalry between these groups. But within the Ansar, those who were in Medina, you also had different tribes. You had a tribe called Aus, you had a tribe called Khazraj. These tribes had been warring with each other for decades, right? Even over small things, right? Sometimes at that time, some of these Arab tribes, they would fight with each other for so many years, so much so over the smallest thing, because they had built this hatred towards one another. So now the Prophet has to bring these people together. Not only the Meccans and those in Medina, but even within Medina. Within those who are coming from Mecca, well, you have some who are the nobles of Quraysh, and then you have the slaves. So these people are all migrating. Okay. Now, what does the Prophet do? He says that you Muslims who are coming to Medina to form this new society, new government, you are going to form this thing called the Akhdul Ukhuwa, right? The pact of brotherhood. Each one of you, I'm going to make you the brother of another person. If you are a slave, you are a brother to a rich man. If you are a rich man, you are a brother to a slave. If you are a Meccan, you are a brother to one from Medina. If you are from Aus, you are a brother to one from Khazraj, and vice versa. All of the prior identities that these people had were slowly, right, diminished. Why? Because he created a new identity for these Muslims. He said that what is not important is not your tribe, it is not your background, it's not your wealth, right? Now you are brothers in Islam. And the verse of Quran says that you were on the pit of a brink of fire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved you from it. And that is one of the ayat of God. That these people who hated each other, who had fought with each other for so many years, right? For the smallest things became united. If you look at the history of the Middle East, right, this was an area full of strife. And maybe even today we can say that there's always conflict there. Right? But at the time of the Holy Prophet, his genius was to bring these people together. On what basis? On the basis of a shared identity. Right? So similarly, we have that today. We say that one of the functions of our rituals is to give us an identity. We say, like, for example, when you see a woman in hijab, okay, of course she's doing that out of modesty, right? Out of haya, because this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked for women and for men. But it also is giving her what? An identity. That if I see now someone else in hijab, right now we have a common bond. If I'm praying and you are praying and we're praying in the same direction and I see a Muslim person praying at the airport, what? I have a bond with that person. It's not spoken, but I know that there's a shared identity there. So all of these rituals, all of these ideas now create this new identity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to have. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay. So well, you know that, right, another aspect of identity building. When the Prophet was in Mecca, the Qibla of the Muslims was where? Mecca was the Jerusalem. Jerusalem. Now, one of the things that happened, right, and this is something that, right, I'd really like the youth to pay attention to this point, really like the youth to pay attention. You know, do we think that the Prophet was never, right, we might struggle with our Muslim identity. Do you think the Prophet never struggled with that? People hated him, right, made fun of him, disliked him for being Muslim. Right? This is something that is in the seerah of the Prophet, that he was humiliated, insulted, made fun of, mocked just for Islam, right? Not for like how he looked, just for being a Muslim. Do we think that this is something new, right, in the world today, this Islamophobia, this idea that Muslims are like this, Muslims are that? No. Right? In fact, one of the things that the Bani Israel, the Yahud, they would make fun of the Holy Prophet for was what? They said that you, Rasulullah, you claim that you have brought a new deen, but your Qibla is our Qibla. Right? You're just copying us. So what is this, right, deen that you claim you're bringing, right, if you're just doing everything like this, like us? So this is one of the things that in the Quran it says that this bothered the Prophet. قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلَّبُ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا. Allah says to the Holy Prophet, we see you turning your face towards the skies, right, looking for the Qibla. And soon we will give you a Qibla that will please you, O Holy Prophet. Right? We will give you a Qibla that makes you radi. Okay, and then in the verse it says that فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ وَحَيْثُ مَا كُنْتُ فَوَلُّوهُ وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرَهُ. And turn your face now wherever you are to the sacred mosque, to the holy Kaaba. Wherever you are, turn your face there in the direction of prayer. So what? The Holy Prophet himself is being consoled in the Quran that the Yahud are making fun of him for what? For praying in the direction of Bayt al-Muqaddas. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, what? We see you. We see you turning this way and that way. We see your distress, and soon we will give you a qibla that will make you pleased. And then the verse continues that, so turn your face towards the holy Kaaba. And as the story goes, the Prophet was in this masjid that is now known as Masjid Qiblatain, masjid of the two qiblas, in which he was praying. And what? Jibreel comes during the Zohar prayer, and he tells the Prophet to turn facing the opposite direction. And when he does, according to some narrations, Amir al-Mu'mineen is in the front on that side, and he continues the prayer from there. Right? And so the Jamaat continues. So in the middle of the prayer, the Qibla is changed. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Right? So you see how this identity is being built, right? These distinctions from these other communities, this idea of a certain dress, this idea of a certain Qibla, this idea of building an Islamic identity amongst his followers, right? Slowly, the Prophet is building an idea. So this is what we have to do. Right? We have to teach our kids, what does it mean for you to be a Muslim? What does it mean for you to be a lover of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam? Right? And what does that mean for other lovers of Abu Abdullah? This is who you are. Right? If your identity is that you are a ghulam of Hussein, right? Your identity is you're a ghulam of Hussein. What better identity could there be? Now, right? If you get that into the child, now he knows that my identity is to serve. All these people who are servants of Hussein, they are serving. So my role also is to serve. And how dare I disrespect another servant of Hussein? Right? Because maybe that person made a mistake, but he's still a servant of Hussein as well. Right? Just like I'm on this path, I'm behind this alam, he's also on this alam as well. He's also on this path. Right? What? You've created an idea in his mind. Okay. So the verse continues, وَلَن تَرْضَ عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَن نَصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ. Quran says that never will the Yahud and the Nasara, referring to the Holy Prophet, be satisfied with you until you follow their faith. Say, Holy Prophet, قُلْ إِنَّا هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى لَإِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَحْوَاءَهُمْ بَعْدَ الَّذِي جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ مَا لَكَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مِنْ وَلِيٍّ وَلَا نَصِيرٍ. Say to the Jews and the Christians that God's guidance, Allah's guidance, is the true guidance. O Prophet, if you were to follow their hawa, if you were to follow the guidance of the Jews and the Christians after the guidance that has been coming to you as a Muslim, then you would not have any nasir, any helper, or nor any wali. Okay, so what is this telling us? This is saying that there is a group of Jews and Christians, O Prophet, who will never be satisfied with you until what? Until you follow them. There's a group of people who will never be happy with you, who will never accept you until you are like them. And we see that today. Maybe there's some people who accept us for who we are. There's many people who say that until you become like John and Tom and Harry, right, we won't accept you. Right? You're like not a human to us. Right? And that arrogance, see the arrogance that comes in to this kind of thinking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O Prophet, right, they will never be satisfied with you until you follow them. But if you follow them, then realize that you're turning your back on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you follow them. And you'll be left without a nasir. Okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. See, there's nothing more than what some people want than to see our identity folded into, right, this broader identity. And this is something that's very difficult for any minority community to survive. Right? This is why these majalis are so important. That there is ihya'ul umurina. The affairs of the Ahlul Bayt are brought back to life through these majalis. And this is why it's important for you all to meet regularly, so that this identity can remain strong. This is important, why it's important for you to learn more about the deen, so the identity can be strong. right? There's some people that want nothing more than for us to lose this identity. But one small message for the youth, and then we'll go to Masaib. What makes people like you? Right? What is it that makes people like you? Right? When we're talking about identity, so we have two options. Either we can be like we are, or we can be like them. Right? We can fold our identity into that identity, or we can be proud of who we are. What's actually more effective in getting people to like you, to be popular, if you want to be popular, right? Not that you have to be, but if you're struggling to fit in, to socialize, is being proud of who you are, being confident in who you are, not actually trying to always fit in, not trying to be the one that says that, let me be like everybody else. Right? That's a very difficult thread to balance, right? Being confident in who you are is something that attracts other people to you. If you are the person that's always trying to copy this person and this person and this person and this person, that's not attractive to other people. That's something that will turn people away from you. Okay? So even when it comes to being socially, right, normal, fitting in with other people, right, the secret is not to compromise your identity. The secret is to be proud of who you are. And I will let you all think about how we can do that, because that's not a easy question to answer. How do we keep that identity strong? How do we keep that identity, right, firm? How do we give that identity to our children? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, a few moments of musibah. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdillah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibna Rasulillah. وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين بأبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. يا أبا عبد الله روحي وأرواح العالمين لك الفداء. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز معكم فوزا عظيما. يا أبا عبد الله, if we were with you in the plains of Karbala, we would have succeeded a great success. Ya Aba Abdullah, may our lives be sacrificed for you. May the lives of our mothers and fathers be sacrificed for you. After the death of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he had a few sons, and he said that one of the older sons, Hazrat Qasim, Imam Hussein was like a father to Qasim, that he raised him as his own son. But Qasim, a few things. One was that he resembled his father, Hassan al-Mujtaba. And when it came to the Battle of Karbala, they say that Hazrat Qasim was the tender age of 13, which means that he was not even baligh when it came to the Battle of Karbala. When Hussein is speaking to his ashab and ansar, they begin telling Hussein that we are ready for shahada. And maybe Qasim thinks to himself that I'm only 13 years old, but will I have this honor as well? He goes to Imam Hussein, he says, oh Hussein, tomorrow will I achieve shahadat as well? Hussein says, Qasim, kayf al-maut indak? That, oh Qasim, you are 13 and you're asking me about shahada, but what is your view on death? Qasim says, al-maut aladhu min al-asal. That death to me is better than honey. What could be sweeter than that? At that point, Qasim surely didn't know the fate that awaited him. On the day of Ashura, we are told that Qasim keeps coming to Imam Hussein. He says, Ammu Jan, is it time for me? Can I go to the Maidan? Ammu Jan, please let me go to the Maidan. Hussein, each time he came, he would not give permission to Hazrat Qasim. He said, Qasim, no, it is not time for you. But when Qasim had lost hope of going to the battlefield, he went and he talked to his mother, Farwa. And he said, oh, Farwa, my dear mother, Hussein, Ammu Hussein isn't giving me permission to go to the Maidan. Just then, Farwa remembered that when her husband, Imam Hassan, had died, he had left a ta'weez. He had said to her that, oh, Farwa, take this ta'weez with you. And whenever you see that when the world is closing in on you, when there is a difficulty that you cannot get out of, open this ta'weez and there will be a solution awaiting you. So she gives that ta'weez to Hazrat Qasim alayhi salam, and inside that ta'weez there are two letters. One of those letters is to Hazrat Qasim, the other is to Imam Hassan's brother, Imam al-Hussein. Qasim opens the letter from his father, says, oh Qasim, when you read this letter from me, I will not be with you in this world. I will not be with you in Karbala, but when Hussein needs your help, do not hold back from going to the Maidan. Qasim, you are my representative in Karbala. Qasim takes the letter and he shows it to Hussein. He says, Ammu Jan, my father has a letter for you as well. Hussein begins to read the letter from his brother Hassan. It says, oh Hussein, when my son Qasim comes to you to go to the Maidan, then don't hold him back. Just then Hamid ibn Muslim narrates that when Hussein read this letter, when he read this letter from his older brother, Imam al-Hassan, Hamid ibn Muslim, who was on the side of the Ashqiya, when on the side of the Mal'uneen, he says that this was one time when Hussein alayhi salam, he hugged Qasim and he brought his neck to his own neck. And Imam Hussein began to cry. And at that point, he began to cry and he began to hug Hazrat Qasim, so much so that they say that he became unconscious and he fell down on the ground. He said that I didn't see Hussein have this reaction with anyone like the reaction he had when he hugged Qasim. When it was time to say goodbye, Hussein helps Qasim onto the horse. He says, Al-Wida to my son. Qasim begins going out for jihad. Qasim gets on the horse. It's narrated that there were two mothers who were watching their children go to the Maidan. One of those mothers was Hazrat Farwa, the mother of Qasim. One of them was Rubab. Both of these mothers, they watched as their sons went towards the Maidan. The difference between these two, my dear brothers, is that when Farwa sent Qasim to the Maidan, she knew that he was not going to come back to her. But when Rubab sent Ali al-Asghar with Hussein, she thought that this baby is going to come back to my hands. Farwa was watching her son from a distance. The yatim of Imam Hassan comes into the battlefield. Qasim begins fighting with the enemies. Umar ibn Sa'd says this boy is 13 years old, but he's not a normal boy. One by one, Qasim begins fighting the Mal'uneen, sending them to Jahannam. It's narrated that in this battle, the sandal of Qasim is broken, At one point in the battle, Qasim bends down to fix his sandal. Just then, one of the Mal'ooneen comes from behind and strikes Qasim from behind. He breaks the spine of Hazrat Qasim. Qasim falls down from his horse. He begins to call out, Wa amma adrikni. Hamid ibn Muslim says that I never saw Hussein go with that speed as he did when Qasim was calling him. He charged towards the body of Qasim. Qasim cries out, Wa amma adrikni. Oh my Ammu Jan, come to me. Hussein cries out, my son Qasim, where are you? Where is your body? When the dust had settled, Hussein reached the body of Qasim. In the hangama that was made during this time, it's narrated that Hazrat Qasim is the only shaheed whose body was trampled while he was still alive. Hussein reaches Qasim and he begins to cry. He says, Qasim, if you knew how it would hurt your Hussein that you kept calling me, but I could not help you. He gets to the body of Qasim and he says, how will I take this body back to Farwa? He lifts Qasim onto his shoulders. It's narrated that as he's bringing the body back, the feet of Qasim are dragging on the ground. He says, Ya Farwa, Ya Farwa, your son has come back. Farwa says, Wa walada. Hussein puts the body of Qasim next to the body of Aliun al-Akbar. He sits between them. He looks up at the sky. Hussein says, Ya Rabbi. Hussein has lost all of his sons. Hussein has lost all of his children. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم يا الله بحق محمد بحق فاطمة بحق علي بحق حسن بحق حسين. All those mu'mineen and mu'minat who have attended this majlis, all those who are in difficulty or in illness, who have a sickness, have a disability, please provide for them, give them shifa, kamil or ajil. All those mu'mineen and mu'minat who are going through financial difficulty, who have difficulty making ends meet, please provide for them from your rizq al-wasi'. All those mu'mineen and mu'minat who have difficulties in their relationships with their families, their parents, their in-laws, their brothers, sisters, children, friends, please mend their hearts and bring their hearts back together. وَالْآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا أَنِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ مَاتَنِ حُسَيْنِ. Ya Hussein, 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 Karbala ki kahani jab कोई भी सुनाएगा दिल वालों की आँखों से एक दरिया बहाएगा वो काफिला सरवर का जो शान से निकला था सुगरा को खबर क्या थी ना लौट के आएगा ज़हरा
زہرا پرسال و بہتر کا زہرا زہرا پرسال و بہتر کا زہرا زہرا پرسال و بہتر کا ٹوٹی ہے کمر شہ کی گھبرانا مگر اکبر ٹوٹی ہے کمر شہ کی گھبرانا مگر اکبر فرزند نبی تیری میت کو اٹھائے گا زہرا زہرا اکبر کبھی پرسالو زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا ہاتھوں کے کتنے کا کچھ غم نہ دلاور کو ہاتھوں کے کٹنے کا کچھ غم نہ دلاور کو سیدانیوں کا پردہ اب کون بچائے گا زہرا زہرا عباس کا پرسالو زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا پامال ہوا قاسم جب گھوڑوں کی ٹاپوں سے پامال ہوا قاسم جب گھوڑوں کی ٹاپوں سے کس طرح چچا تیری میت کو اٹھائے گا زہرا زہرا قاسم کا بھی پرسالو زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا سوتے ہیں نہ تھے اصغر جھولے میں تڑپتے تھے سوتے ہیں نہ تھے اصغر جھولے میں تڑپتے تھے مادر کو خبر کیا تھی ایک تیر سلائے گا زہرا زہرا اصغر کا بھی پرسالو زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا سرور نے اٹھائے تھے سب ساتھیوں کے لاشیں سرور نے اٹھائے تھے سب ساتھیوں کے لاشیں شبیر تیرا لاشا اب کون اٹھائے گا زہرا زہرا شبیر کا پرسالو زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا زہرا زہرا پرسالو بہتر کا یا حسین 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 یا حسین
قتل ہو گئے قاسم یا علی دہائی ہے قتل ہو گئے قاسم یا علی دہائی ہے لہو بھرا چہرہ کیسی رونمائی ہے دیکھنے کو یہ منظر، اب دلہن بھی آئی ہے، ایک دن کی تھی شادی، حشر تک جدائی ہے، کربلا کے دلہے کی لاش گھر میں آئی ہے، علی قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، دو جہان کیوں روئے، یہ علی کا پوتا ہے، بے کسی پہ قاسم کی دل شکستہ ہوتا ہے، کسی کو کوئی جان کھوتا ہے، قاسم یا علی دہائی ہے، قتل ہو گئے قاسم،
یا علی دہائی ہے،
کس لیے تڑپتے ہیں، کس کو جان یہ سمجھے، کیا گزرتی ہم پر وہ، تو بس خدا جانے، قلب بھی ہمارا ہے، ہم شاہ کے ذاقانے، ہے عزائے قاسم میں آنسوؤں کے نذرانے، علی قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، آج کربلا والے پھر ہمارے مہمان ہیں، پھول کو بھی مہندی ہو، سب اذاں کے ساما ہے، اہتمام شادی کے ایک بہن کے ارماں ہے، غمزدہ کے نذرانے آنسوؤں کے طوفان ہے، قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، بین تھے یہ کبرا کے، اب تو گھٹ رہا ہے دم، بولتے نہیں کچھ بھی، آج میرے ابن کس طرح سے دکھلائے اپنا یہ دل کا غم، بولیے پھوپھی اماں چپ رہے کہ روئے ہم، قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، مثل فاطمہ کبرا کون سی دلہن ہوگی، سر تو بے رواں ہوگا، ہاتھ میں رسن ہوگی، لاش جس کے وارث کی رنگ میں بے کفن ہوگی، اے رفیع اس غم میں قوم سینہ زنا ہوگی، علی قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، قتل ہو گئے قاسم، یا علی دہائی ہے، یا حسین 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 یا حسین
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein.
یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، کیوں گلوں کی خوشبو سے سارا رن مہکتا ہے، پیرہن معطر ہے، کیا یہ کوئی دولہا ہے، چاند سا حسین چہرہ دھوپ میں چمکتا ہے، چاند سا حسین چہرہ دھوپ میں چمکتا ہے، اور لہو کی دھاروں کا اس کے رخ پر صحرا ہے، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، جب لگائی تھی مہندی اس کو پیاری بہنا نے، ماں لباس نو لے کر آئی اس کو پہنانے، سب براتیوں کے تھے آنسوؤں کے نذرانے، سب براتیوں کے تھے آنسوؤں کے نذرانے، صبح کی تھی یہ باتیں شام کی خدا جانے، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، تشنگی کے صحرا میں آگ سی برستی ہے، بوند بوند پانی کو زندگی ترستی ہے، تشنہ کام دولہا ہے اور دلہن بھی پیاسی ہے، تشنہ کام دولہا ہے اور دلہن بھی پیاسی ہے، ہائے کیسی شادی ہے ہر طرف اداسی ہے، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، صبح سے کئی لاشیں لے کے آئے میدان سے، پر یہ لاش لانے کی شان ہی نرالی ہے، ایک ابا کے گوشے میں جس کی لاش آ جائے، ایک ابا کے گوشے میں جس کی لاش آ جائے، اس کے جسم اطہر پر گزری کیا خدا جانے، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، ہو گئی دلہن بیوہ شے کا دل تڑپتا ہے، ہر نفس وہی منظر چشم نم میں رہتا ہے، غشم ام فروا ہے اور دلہن کو سکتا ہے، غشم ام فروا ہے اور دلہن کو سکتا ہے، اب رضا قیامت ہے آسمان لرزتا ہے، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یہ حسین مقتل سے کس کی لاش لاتے ہیں، یا حسین 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 یا حسین
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein. ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی سپڑو ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی کبرا دا بابا چادر بچھا کے چن چن کے پاوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی کبرا دا بابا چادر بچھا کے چن چن کے پاوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی سپڑو ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی قاسم دی خیام اندر جدو مہندی آئی بنڑے دی ماں نے سر خاک پائی بنڑی دا بابا بھینی بلا کے رو رو وکھاوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی کچھ مہندی گھوڑے سما چ لے گئے کچھ عہدے ٹکڑے مقتل چ لے گئے کچھ مہندی گھوڑے سما چ رہ گئے کچھ عہدے ٹکڑے مقتل چ رہ گئے شبیر کی وے مقتل چ پوری خیمے پہنچاوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی مقتل چوں سید بہن پایا کلا ہے نانا زہرا دا جایا مقتل چوں سید بہن پایا کلا ہے نانا زہرا دا جایا کوثر کنارے میرے ٹر گئے سارے کیڑا اٹھاوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی تو کیریو دے تو سینی راضی مظلوم کربل دی بھیڑ راضی قاسم دی تربت دل وچ بسا کے جیڑا سجاوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی کبرا دا بابا چادر بچھا کے چن چن کے پاوے قاسم دی مہندی ریتاں چ ڈل گئی مٹیاں چ رل گئی ماں نور واوے قاسم دی مہندی یا حسین 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 یا حسین
الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا نبي الله يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم جميع شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد الحادي. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك حجته الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
नारे हैदरी।